This is BBC One. Now a budget response by the Conservative Party.
Good evening. Yesterday the Chancellor gave us his new budget. All over Britain, people also have to make their own household budgets. Although the amounts that the Chancellor has to deal with are much larger, the basic principles are the same. We know that if the amount we spend is bigger than the amount coming in, we'll have to borrow the difference. You can't spend more than you earn without borrowing. Lots of people in this country today are doing just that, borrowing. Families in Britain have more debt today than we have ever had before. The problem is that the Chancellor is also in debt. He has used the nation's credit card to borrow £37 billion, £1,500 for every household in Britain. This is because his spending has been growing faster than his income. Exactly the same problem that many families face. But the Chancellor is lucky. He has something that neither you nor I have. He has a way of getting money to repay any borrowing without having to cut back on his spending. If he's short of cash, he can force us to give it to him by raising our taxes. In the last few years, he's done that, with 60 different stealthy tax increases. Altogether, he's now collecting the equivalent of £5,000 more from each household in Britain each year than he was when Labour came to power in 1997. But a lot of that money, I'm afraid, has been wasted. In our everyday lives, most of us are quite careful with how we spend our money. We try to waste as little as possible because we want to make our money go as far as possible. Unfortunately, the Chancellor has not been as careful as he should have been with our money. He hasn't succeeded in preventing waste. For example, just the other day, we heard about a unit in the NHS that was set up to save money, but in fact wasted tens of thousands of pounds on booking and cancelling expensive away days in a luxury hotel. According to the government's own advisers, that represented just a tiny fraction of the total amount of our money the government is currently wasting each year. In fact, the government's own advisers say that there are so many examples of waste and inefficiency that the government is now throwing away a total of £15 billion a year, almost half of what the Chancellor is borrowing this year. That's £600 a year for each household in Britain down the drain. But, as we see in the budget, the Chancellor has decided that instead of cutting out the waste and using the money wisely to reduce his borrowing, he will go on spending at a huge rate. That can mean only one thing: more tax rises to come. There's only one way we can avoid those extra taxes. We have to cut out the waste and use the £600 per household we save by doing that to reduce our national borrowing. That's what the Conservatives want. Otherwise, I'm afraid that all of us, from pensioners to teachers, doctors, nurses, and every other hard-working family, are going to have to pay more tax. And I'm afraid an awful lot of that extra tax is going to be wasted. It comes down to a fairly simple choice. We can either have a government that's perfectly content to raise taxes, or a government that is very unwilling to do so. I think we need a government which will start being more careful with our nation's money.
That was a budget response by the Conservative Party.